I'm satisfied with just as God is below. A little silver and a little gold. Like that city where the rest will shine. I want a gold one, that silver line. I've got a mansion just over the hilltop in that bright land where we'll never grow old. And someday yonder we will never more wander, but walk the streets that are purest gold. Don't think me poor or deserted or lonely. I'm not discouraged. I'm heaven bound. I'm just a pilgrim in search of a city. I want a mansion, a robe and a crown. I've got a mansion just over the hilltop in that bright land where we'll never grow old. And someday yonder we'll never more.
Good morning. There we go. Good morning.
Good morning.
There we are. We got one. I had one the first time and I got everybody the next time. Well, thank you so much for being here at our Sunday morning Bible class. This morning, we're going to continue in our Gospel Advocate book, Foundations. Hopefully you were able to read ahead of time. But we'll be looking at Noah and his family today. So we'll be starting on page 11 if you have a book, Noah and his family. And I think the book does a really good job of going over kind of the summary of what, a good job of going over the summary of the story of Noah and his family. But I don't think it gives the full context. And many of you, having been in Bible classes for many years, would know a general overview. So I want to just pick back up and make sure we remember the context around the lesson. So I'm going to start a little bit earlier in Genesis chapter 6, where we can really see how wicked man had become during this time. So we know we've just finished the account of creation and the first family with Adam and Eve, Cain, Abel, and Seth. And then, of course, Noah had... Seth's children go on and they're listed out with a genealogy. We have really long lifespans during this time. Remember, in Genesis chapter 1, God gives animal and man the authority to eat plants, but we don't yet have any recordings of people eating meat. We do have Abel, who of course made a sacrifice for God that was pleasing, and he was a keeper of sheep. So we know there was animal sacrifice at that time, but we don't have any recording of man eating meat for food at this time. But let's get into Genesis chapter 6. And we'll just talk about some controversies real quick. I don't have all the answers. If you ask me too tough of a question, I'll divert it to our eldership, and they can be on the spot. Elders love that, right? Genesis 6, verse 1. Now it came to pass when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born to them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were beautiful, and they took wives for themselves of all whom they chose. And the Lord said, My spirit shall not strive with man forever, for he is indeed flesh, yet his days shall be 120 years. There were giants on the earth in those days, and also afterwards, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and bore children to them. Those were the mighty men who are of old, men of renown. Then the Lord saw that wickedness of man was great in the earth, and every intent of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. The Lord was sorry that he made man on the earth. He was grieved in his heart. So the Lord said, I will destroy man whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast, creeping thing and birds of the air, for I am sorry that I have made them. But Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. There's some interesting things there. We've got giants appearing, and we have mighty men of old. We have the sons of God having children with the daughters of men, and somehow getting mighty men of old. Now, I'm not the person to explain this best. I did research it. I looked into it as thoroughly as I could in the time I had, but I don't have any really strong answers. There's a couple of theories out there, and none of them, I think, are rock solid evidence. I'll say briefly, there's some thought that maybe some fallen angels had come down into some kind of physical form and been carried away with lust and had children with women. I think that probably makes sense in my mind that might give them some kind of giant-like abilities and mighty men powers. What doesn't make any sense in my mind is that Jesus in the New Testament tells us that the angels are neither given, they're not married, nor are they given in marriage, right? So they're presented as spiritual beings that would not be lusting after physical flesh. Maybe these fallen angels were corrupted in some way and were then able to do that. I don't know. There's thoughts that maybe there were spiritual men and they should not have been with carnal women or of some kind, and that maybe that somehow produced their unholy union produced some kind of mighty men, right? I don't know the answer to that. Or it could just be that these were somehow, regular men. I don't understand where the mighty men part comes from in that situation. So there's kind of three options to choose from. I think there are things that make sense about each of those three options. I think there are things that don't make sense. Ultimately, I look at it and I say, God didn't give me enough to be very definitive with this. It is interesting to read, but this was the situation on earth. Apparently, the mighty men weren't mighty men living righteously. I will say that because they were the men of earth their hearts are on evil continually. We'll get into that more in a second. Anybody want to say anything about the mighty men or the giants?
I think it was just faithful people intermarrying with unfaithful people.
So that's certainly a thought that's out there. I think to me the fallen angel thing does seem to be a bit of a stretch. The only thing that I think it makes sense about it is that maybe that they get some type of power that is beyond what a normal man would get. That's the only reason to think that would even be a thing. I'm grateful that isn't a thing that seems to be happening today, that God has limited that now. Anybody else have any comment on that?
I think they were just people. Mighty men may be leaders of men. And when you talk about people coming down as angels, I think that's hogwash. I think you go back, God didn't create these other people specifically to intermarry with, what do you call them, carnal people.
Yeah.
No, I think it's just garbage to suppose that these were created angels that came down. No.
Yeah, so Mr. Jim points out, in order to do the fallen angel theories, you've got a lot of supposition happening, and he's not a believer in that one.
I wonder if, Moses has a habit of repeating himself or going backwards, kind of not being in chronological order, and so it could very well be that the beginning of chapter 6 is actually talking about the same thing he talks about in chapter 5, which is the genealogy from Adam to Noah. He talks specifically about those men who had such long lifespans and had so many children, such big families, and it could be that these two are really kind of tied together.
Yeah, so Jeremy points out that chronologically, the way we read it may not be the chronological order. He could be going back to chapter 5. And we see that a whole lot where the chronology of the events recorded in this early Genesis passage are in question, to where you're not exactly sure the order of events to be 100% clear of the order of the events.
But that would be in line, I think, with mighty men, that leaders of people.
They still could have established great leadership, right? And they would have been mighty men. I agree with that.
It's only mentioned those that were in leadership positions in the chronological order.
Yeah.
There are also giants.
There are also giants in the land at this time.
Goliath was 9 feet tall.
Yes, so they're going to reappear later in our Bible chronology, right? Giants are going to reappear. So they're mentioned here, and then they're mentioned again later. So it's not something that is strictly to the pre-flood time.
The really important thing is no matter who these mighty men were, who the Nephilim were, none of them were doing the right thing as far as God was concerned. They were wicked.
So Jeremy hit my next conclusion. It doesn't really matter a whole lot about what's going on as far as my walk today. It doesn't really matter which of those situations is the case. Ultimately, God looks down and says, everybody's heart is set on evil continually. What a terrible thing to be said of us. And it can be said of people today, I feel like. People can choose to want to twist and pervert and add sinful things to almost every event that you can think of today. And the thing is, once a person starts leaning into a sinful lifestyle and a sinful culture, they are able to infuse that into every situation, no matter how good the situation might be, right? We've all met somebody like that where it just seemed like they were able to twist every single situation into a negative, to bring out the worst, to look at a situation and assume that the person that was in that situation meant the very worst every time. They could always see the worst and then inject sinful thinking in that. And so, there's some parts of our humanity that are there today, I would say, and probably have been continuously, right? But here God looks at this time frame and says, it's exceedingly bad. He looks down and says, grace, he looks at Noah, and that's the person that he finds grace for, right? So we know Noah is somehow doing something differently. And we'll see just how far Noah is willing to go to do what the Lord says. So we know Noah is walking with the Lord here in chapter 6, and he has 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And so God's looking down on this evil situation, and he's regretting that he's made them. And so he decides that he is going to destroy all mankind, all land animals, with a flood that will cover the entire earth. In case I haven't mentioned it, do remember at this point, we don't have any rain recorded. In Genesis, we learned that there's a mist that kind of goes out and waters things in the morning, and then it seems to kind of evaporate as the day goes on. So we don't have any rainfall at this point. So it doesn't appear that there's been any kind of sudden changes in river levels or flooding events. We don't know, but it doesn't seem like sudden torrential rain has occurred yet. So God is going to go to Noah, and he says, the end of all flesh, in verse 13, the end of all flesh has come before me. The earth is filled with violence through them, and behold, I will destroy them with the earth. Make yourself an ark of gopher wood, make rooms in the ark, and cover it inside and outside with pitch. And this is how you shall make it. And we get 300 cubits long, 50 cubits wide, and 30 cubits tall, which does happen to be common shipbuilding ratios to this day, to modern times. Very stable structure. So we can see that God knew how to build a boat even when Noah didn't. He was able to give him good directions. Make a window in the ark, and you shall finish it. And he gives its dimensions. And he says, behold, in verse 17, behold, I myself will bring the floodwaters on the earth to destroy from under heaven all flesh in which is the breath of life. Everything that is on the earth shall die, and I will establish my covenant with you. And you will go into the ark, you, your sons, your wife, and your sons' wives with you. And at this time he says, 2 of every living thing you shall bring forth into the ark to keep them alive with you, and they shall be male and female, of the birds, of the creeping things, of every kind, to keep them alive. So Noah begins this great work. Now, when Noah is told, it does appear that he's got 3 sons and 3 daughters-in-law. So that makes Noah and his wife 3 sons and 3 daughters-in-law. So that's 8 people, right? How long are they going to have to work on this ark to get it ready? So I don't think we're given a perfect number, but it's pretty long time. At least probably 50 years, but more likely longer. And we know that Noah's total lifespan is going to be about 950 years, if I remember correctly. So that's a good portion of his life that's spent building this ark, he and his sons with him, right? How long would it take me to build that ark? A long time is the answer, because I don't have the know-how. I don't have a good understanding of building skills. I have to believe that God provided Noah what he needed to obey, as he does for us today. Today, he wants us to obey his word. So we have a copy of the Bible. We can get it out, we can look at it, and we can make sure our lives measure up. I have to make the assumption that God gave Noah enough of the plans and enough of the pattern that he could follow it to the best of his ability and it work. Mr. Jim, you had your hand up.
He'd never seen, as far as we could tell, he'd never seen anything like this.
No, there would never have been anything for him to see before. Certainly would not have understood why are these dimensions the way they are. We'll see that God directs him to basically have 3 floors. And then we have we'll have one door on the side that we'll see about in just a minute. But he's never seen anything like this, and he has to get, not only himself, he has to choose to follow what God says, but he's going to need his sons to help too. And then we see that they do begin to do that, right? What does that say about Noah as a father, that he's able to tell his sons, hey, I have spoken with God. There's going to be a catastrophic flooding event, which has never happened before. I don't understand how this is going to happen, but water is going to cover the whole earth. We need to build this giant ark according to the pattern God is showing to me, or we're all going to die. And they apparently say yes. What does that say about Noah and his leadership as a father?
They had trust in him. They trusted him.
They did trust him.
They had great faith.
They had great faith, not only in him, but they had to have great faith in God as well, right? If my father came to me today and said this, I might say, we need to take you to the doctor and up your pills. But we see, they look at him and he's perfectly in his right mind, and they see a course of action that needs to be taken. Think about the tremendous amount of time this project would have taken. There would have had to be lumber gathered, there would have had to be supplies gathered.
Space to build it.
The expense,
Space.
yes, there would have to be a big space cleared of some type to be able to build this, though I guess they could have built it in a perfectly wide open, dry place, not close to any type of body of water, right? Because no body of water, what would they have floated it on? So there's just a lot here where they have to step out into an action of faith, obedient faith, to know that God has told them and that's enough, right? That's something we have to do today. We have to we have to hear the plan of salvation, and we have to step out into it, right? We can't see God's hand ready to catch us and save us and bring us into his fold. Not with our eyes, we certainly can't. But we have to have the faith to know that that is the case, and we have to be willing to take action based off of it today. Any thoughts there? It's a big undertaking. We also see that it makes perfect sense to take every animal, a male and female of its kind, to plan to repopulate the world. And then later we'll get into a little bit more detail on that. So we can see 7 days before the flood actually hits, we get an update. Let me find my spot here. I've lost my spot. And that's in Genesis chapter 7, verse 4. He says, "For after 7 more days I will cause it to rain on the earth, 40 days and 40 nights. I will destroy from the face of the earth all living things that I have made." And Noah did according to all that the Lord commanded him. Noah was 600 years old when the flood waters were on the earth. So I'm not sure what Noah had to do in the way of preparation for animals. It doesn't appear that he was having to long-term gather them together and put them in, loads of pens outside of the ark. Basically, God tells him, hey, once the ark is ready, God says, okay, in 7 days from now is when it's going to hit. And the day that it's going to hit, you see the people load up and the animals do as well. That's another divinely providential thing. I will tell you from my own personal experience, when Michelle's parents are needing to move cows from pasture A to pasture B, they pretty much plan for 30 minutes to do so, to load them into the trailer. And that's when we have pens that are perfectly designed to drive the animals into a smaller corral, then work them into a head catch situation where they can run right onto a trailer that's perfectly designed for us with metal sweeping gates that push the animals in. It still takes us 30 minutes to move about 25. That's my guess. So how and Noah and his family ever conceive to manually control that many animals in that kind of a time frame into that small of a space? Just don't think it would happen. Yes, ma'am. Noah didn't do it, God did. And that's the point. Noah didn't do it, God did. Now, Noah had some advantages, and what we see in these passages that if you've read, I brought out earlier that man wasn't eating meat at this time, or at least we certainly don't have it recorded. After they get off the boat, you'll see that God's going to change that, and we'll see that the fear of man will come on all the animals. For right now, one advantage that they have is animal and man appear to be working together with no issues. The animals are not afraid of them, so it could be that they could just be standing right beside them and they would go on. And that was an advantage they had, but certainly I just don't think they had any ability to move those numbers of animals in that kind of time frame. It just had to be God. The other part of that question will be, and my wife said it's kind of neither here nor there. I'm not sure. We'll get into it. Let me skip that until we actually get there. I'm ahead of myself. So we see once they're on the ark, the floodwaters hit, but most importantly, before the floodwaters hit, who can remember how do they get the final door of the ark closed? It makes very clear God closes the door. It's not the men that are doing it. You know, we know that the gopher wood was used to build the ark according to God's plan. They were to pitch the inside and the outside of the ark, and that would have been a tremendous undertaking to do all that labor. But in the very last bit of it, it's not man anymore. God is going to do that work for them in a miraculous way, it seems. And that would have been a powerful thing to know. If I had built the ark and I needed that door closed, and then to see it close on its own and seal up on its own through the power of God, that would make me feel much better in my decision. I guess their faith allowed them to be sure of it, but to see that final step would have been a really concrete proof for me that I have followed what God has said and He's approved this plan. So we know it's going to rain on the earth for 40 days and 40 nights. We also have water not only coming from the sky for the first time, but we also have waters coming up from the deep in an interesting way. The waters prevailed in verse 18. The waters prevailed and greatly increased on the earth, and the ark moved about on the surface of the waters. The waters prevailed exceedingly on the earth, and all the high hills under the whole heaven were covered. The waters prevailed 15 cubits upward, and the mountains were covered. All flesh on the earth dies. So we can see that in this amazing demonstration of power, water suddenly comes down in this torrential way and just covers the entire earth. The first moment the ark started lurching must have been a tremendous moment for the people on board, right? To feel... Is it going to float? I don't know if this is one of those situations where the people had to have faith in order to be saved. We're not told. They had certainly demonstrated faith over their time frame of building it. But boy, it would have been a tremendous moment to feel that first shudder and it start lurching a little bit and then finally lifting off and saying, well, we're free floating now. Would have been a tremendous thing.
But God made all the other preparations. This one is okay.
Well, and it would have helped a lot in my mind that God had just closed the door for me. That would have made me feel much better. A lot of people ask, what is it like on the ark? I truly don't know. We can suppose a lot of things. Did the animals somehow require less feed or water than normal, or were they not? What did they do with just the sheer volume of animals, and they go to the bathroom? How do we clean that up? I don't know.
We don't know how old they were either, right? They could have been not mature, they could have been smaller.
That's certainly a thought. I'm kind of hesitant on that one though, because they're going to get off the ark, and then it's like they're immediately told to be fruitful. The people are at least immediately.
Able to.
Yeah, it seems like they're immediately told to be fruitful and multiply. So maybe there's the small animals, maybe on the super big ones. I don't know. This is another question of faith here, where I have to say, this family, how could they have possibly dealt with it if everything worked like a traditional zoo, right? It takes many more people to work on that. I'm still confused. I'll bring it up because I keep coming back to it. I'm still confused what the lion is eating at this time, because, if you only took 2 of each kind of the things it could eat. We did see, importantly, and I skipped over this, it's my fault, right, the 7 days before is when we have recorded, the Bible is going to tell Noah that he's going to need to, instead of taking 2 of each kind, he's going to take 7 of the clean animals, male and female, and he'll take 7 of the birds of the air as well. And that's going to be important, I think, for a few reasons. One, of course, that's going to allow for animal sacrifice and not allow the extermination of that species. It's also going to allow them to potentially to have food, because there will be these animals. This is the first time that we have a distinction between clean and unclean animals. I don't think here, it doesn't necessarily give lots of detail on what the clean animals were. We kind of assume from future covenants what they might have been, but we're not told at this point, and just probably because it's not extremely relevant to the story, to the Bible account at this point. But they are told to get 7 of each of the clean animals and 7 birds. So we've got 40 days and 40 nights of rain, and then it stops. But that doesn't stop the boat, and that waters are not instantly gone. So how long are the waters going to stay on the face of the earth? 150 days. 7. Math is hard. 5 months. Yeah, I almost said 7 months. Oops. 5 months of being, no land being visible, right? That's a tremendous amount of time. So they're going to continue on the boat, and then eventually the boat is going to settle on the mountains of Ararat. So at that time, we get the feeling that in chapter 8, verse 6, so it came to pass at the end of the 40 days that Noah opened the window of the ark which he had made, and he sends out a raven. It goes to and fro on the waters until the waters are dried up. So we don't necessarily see that raven again, is my understanding, though it just seems like it just continues to fly. We don't get that one coming back. So later he sends out a dove to see if the waters go down, and the dove doesn't find a resting place. So she returns to the ark. So he puts out and drew the bird back into the ark. He waits another 7 days, and he sends out the dove. And this time she comes back with a freshly plucked olive leaf. So now we've got at least some higher, some plants that are able to, some foliage that's able to be found and to be brought back, but still not a really, still not necessarily a sign that there's the ability for the bird to live out in the wild, because it comes back. And then 7 days later, he sends out a dove, and this time it doesn't come back. It's found a permanent dwelling place that it's happy with. It's not coming back to the boat. I think a raven can probably fly quite a bit further than a dove. The doves don't tend to fly very far, is my understanding, and so that was gave him a good indication of how much land was in the area and available for them to live on. So at that time, he's going to be able to. The waters have dried up, and he's going to let the gate out. And now, God tells him in verse 15 of chapter 8, God spoke to Noah, saying, "Go out of the ark, you and your wife, and your sons and your wives with you, Bring out with you every living thing of all flesh that's with you. And so they go out and they are able to get back on the earth. What a tremendous relief that must have been for everybody, right? They've been cooped up. I'm sure that parts of that ride were not as smooth as they could have been. That's my guess anyway. Michelle doesn't want to get on a big boat because she doesn't like boats. But I can imagine that wasn't the most comfortable ride. There weren't water slides to make it fun. There was just a bunch of animals and very limited light. So I think everybody would have been very happy to get off. And what's the first thing that we're going to see happen in chapter 9? Oh, nope, not 9. In chapter 8, verse 20, Noah built an ark to the Lord and took of every clean animal and of every clean bird and offered burnt offerings on the altar. And the Lord smelled a soothing aroma. Then the Lord said in his heart, I will never again curse the ground for man's sake. Although the imagination of man's heart is evil from his youth, nor will I again destroy every living thing as I have done. And here's the promise that he makes in 22. While the earth remains, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, winter and summer, day and night shall not cease. So we see Noah, as soon as he's able to get out and it's safe for him to make fire, he makes this sacrifice to God, thanking him for his deliverance. And it said that it comes up as a sweet smelling aroma to the Lord. At this point, all of the wickedness of humanity has been wiped off the face of the planet, right? And so now God is now looking down, and there's these 8 people that seem to be faithful that are immediately making a sacrifice to him. There's not the sin happening that was happening previously. And so I get the visualization, even though this is just my mind, of God's breathing in the clean mountain air and saying, wow, this is such a better state of the earth than what I had before.
When God comes to flood, in my mind, that's a miracle because of all the water that came up. And the same thing when it dried up, that God had control over the water. And in verse 22, this is the only time that I think that there's a difference between summer and winter on the earth.
Right. So the scientists that really look at this, I think they'll tell you that, the pre-flood ecosystem was entirely different. We had this mist going out, and we would have had higher humidity generally. And now post-flood, we've got the type of ecosystem that we have now, where we have seasons of rain, seasons of dry. I personally do not understand that type of science well enough to say much about it, other than to say the world was clearly a different place, right? Tremendously different place. And the world pre the flood would have looked so different that I don't think we would have really recognized it, right? We just have a totally different, animals. The relationship between man and animals was different back then. It just was a different place altogether. The environment totally changed. I think that's a very, very fair statement. So, continuing on in chapter 9, starting with verse 2, and this is where some really interesting things happen. The fear of you and the dread of you shall be on every beast of the earth, on every bird of the air, on all that move on the earth, and on all the fish of the sea. They are given into your hand. Every moving thing that lives shall be food for you. I have given you all things, even as the green herbs. But you shall not eat the flesh with its life, that is, the blood. Surely for your lifeblood I will demand a reckoning. From the hand of every beast I will require it, and from the hand of man. From the hand of every man's brother I will require the life of man. Whoever sheds man's blood, by man his blood shall be shed. For in the image of God he has made man. And as for you, be fruitful and multiply. Bring forth abundantly in the earth, and multiply in it. So we see here that this is my really good evidence that prior to this, man had been eating exclusively plants, and God allows at this time for man to eat anything he wants to eat. Now, 7 days before they get on the ark, God separates some animals as clean and some as unclean. But immediately after they get off the ark, are they allowed to eat only clean? It doesn't seem so, right? It seems that anything, any fish, so these folks could eat the catfish. Later on in the next covenant, they'll have unclean animals that they're not to eat, right? But at this time, it seems that everything is an option for them. So kind of interesting there that is the case. The other interesting thing is that this section here sets up what a lot of people would say is a capital punishment type situation, where if a man sheds a man's blood, God is going to require his blood as well. So a lot of people would turn to this passage and say capital punishment is acceptable because of this passage. It's one of the first recordings we have of that. We know that Cain killed Abel, but God did not kill him. He put the mark on him and sent him on. But here in this passage, we have God saying man's blood is special. And once again, the reason for that is man is made in the image of God, in the spiritual image of God. So because of that, we see that God says, if you shed blood, man will shed your blood. Any thoughts there? Kind of interesting, right? He sets this up, and if you look at it from a timeline standpoint, there's only 8 people on the earth, right? And they're all related. So right now, hopefully, murder is not on the table. But unfortunately, it happened in the first family, so why wouldn't it happen potentially again?
I think the scriptures look into the future. Because I know later on, there were certain laws. You could take a guy's life if he killed somebody premeditated.
Yeah. So it is setting up for the future. God is looking to set laws up that all of mankind should be following, right? I think that's very fair. So, and then we see, starting in verse 8, God speaks to Noah and his sons. As for me, behold, I establish my covenant with you and your descendants after you, with every living creature that's on the earth, the birds, cattle, and every beast of every earth with you, of everything that goes out of the earth, every beast on the earth, I establish my covenant with you. Never again shall all flesh be cut off by the waters of the flood. Never again shall there be a flood to destroy the earth. And God said, this is the sign of the covenant which I make between me and you and every living creature. I set my rainbow in the cloud, and it shall be for the sign of the covenant between me and the earth. It shall be when I bring a cloud over the earth, that the rainbow shall be seen in the cloud. I will remember my covenant which is between me and you and every living creature of all flesh. The water shall never again become a flood to destroy all flesh. So the rainbow becomes the symbol that God will never again destroy all flesh. The rainbow symbol is, controversial today because certain groups have tried to take its symbol and twist that. But we as Christians know that God put the rainbow, and as part of his creative powers, he put it in the sky. It is to remind us that he won't destroy the earth with water. We know from the New Testament, how is the world going to be destroyed? Fire. It won't be water ball, it'll be a fireball, right? So God has made that promise to us. Now, that's pretty much where our Foundations book stops. But I didn't feel like that was a very fair place to stop, because in the first 2 major families that the Bible goes over, we have huge problems, right? Last week we saw Adam and Eve. They have one son kill the other. This week we're going to go briefly into this. So let's go on to Genesis. This one won't be in your book. Starting in 20. So Noah began to be a farmer, and he planted a vineyard, and he drank the wine and was drunk and became uncovered in his tent. And Ham, the father of Canaan, saw the nakedness of his father and told his 2 brothers outside. But Shem and Japheth took a garment, laid on their shoulders, walked backwards, and covered the nakedness of their father. Their faces are turned away. They did not see their father's nakedness. So Noah woke from his wine and knew what his younger son had done to him, and said, Cursed be Canaan, a servant of servants he shall be to his brethren. And he said, Blessed be the Lord, the God of Shem, and may Canaan be his servant, and may God enlarge Japheth, and may he dwell in the tents of Shem, and may Canaan be his servant. And Noah lived after the flood 350 years. So we see a major problem arise in this family as well, right? To this point, they had looked like this perfect, glowing family that never made any mistakes. And I think God purposefully includes this in here because no family is perfect. My family is certainly not perfect, and yours probably isn't either. God includes this account. There's a few things. Noah, it has to be several years after the ark because there's been time to build some kind of vineyard of grapes. He's had time to collect them. He's had time to know how to concentrate them into some wine that would get him drunk, right? And so he's made some bad decisions. He's gotten drunk. And, of course, to this point, there's been no rules that I have seen on drunkenness. It's not been mentioned. But we know from God's standard today that's not a thing he desires for us. But Ham goes in and sees his father's nakedness. In my opinion, there's enough detail here for us to know that something occurred and Ham disrespected his father in some way. But it's quite difficult to know exactly what happened, and I don't know that we have to know, or God would have recorded that for us. In any event, Ham goes out and tells his brothers, and they find out about the situation and immediately decide that what's happened or this current state of affairs is not respectful to Noah. They do the right thing. They cover him up. They take care of him. They're not, doesn't seem like they're making fun of him in any way. They're taking care of him and restoring him to his right mind. And then when Noah comes around, he is very upset with what has happened to him by his son Ham. There's a number of theories about what happened, and I think, once again, there's some evidence. I think the flattest reading of it in its most literal context is probably the way that I tend to lead, where he just went in. I think he must have went and told his brothers of what was going on in some kind of disrespectful way, and that was what was so offensive to Noah. That's my take, but there's certainly other thoughts. Mr. Jim?
Do you think there's an inherent modesty code in this time?
Well, there is a modesty code at this time because God had already clothed Adam and Eve and set the standard for that at this time. So I think that should have continued. We certainly don't have it recorded that continued, but if I had to say, I think that's where I'm at. God was displeased with the amount of evil that was on the earth before the flood, and so some type of morality for every man and woman was expected at that time, though we don't have any detailed recordings of how that was told to them or if that was verbal tradition only. My thought is that there had to be some type of expectation from God for modesty even at this time. And certainly there would have been an expectation of respect from the father to be received from the children, and it seems that Ham violated that in some way. And we see the very interesting thing is that when Noah comes to and he's deciding that a curse should be upon someone, who did it go to? Did it go to Ham? Canaan. Ham's son. And not even his first son. I think it's his fourth, if I'm remembering correctly. The sons of Ham were Cush, Mizraim, Put, and Canaan, fourth. So that also tells me that if there were 8 souls saved on the ark and there's 4 kids, either Mrs. Ham had 2 sets of twins or 1 set of quadruplets, or he was fourth, right? So some time has gone on. But Canaan is the one that gets cursed. And a lot of people make a lot out of that. I'm not sure if there's anything to that. I only bring that up to say sin has a generational impact. I like to think that when I don't do what God tells me to do, I'm the one that it comes to, and I'm the one that pays the price. I certainly don't want to think that the choices I make now are going to mean my kids are not as likely to be Christians, not as likely to be faithful. And I really, really feel uncomfortable saying that if I have a failure now, 5 generations from now, my great-great-great-grandkids, I think that was 5, I might be wrong, will still be paying the price for decisions that I made. But it happens, right? It absolutely, that is how sin works. We recently heard a lesson about how sin takes everything and it doesn't let go. So we have to all realize that today, should we choose to be involved with sin, even though we think, oh, this may only be limited to me, our actions are going to lead the next generation into a direction, one way or another, and they could easily still be paying the price for this. And that could just be that we're unfaithful and we stop attending, and then we don't implant the need for God into our children, so they don't implant it into theirs. That's how it goes on. That's how we have generational continuation of sin, right? Or in denominationalism, if I decide that I'm going to leave God's church and go get a part of a denomination, and I firmly plant that denomination in my children's heart, and they plant it in their children's, and they plant it in their, that is how generational sin works. And so we have to be very careful about the choices we make today. Any closing thoughts? No family's perfect, and we want to do the best we can for God. Thank you so much for your attention.